Content warning. We're going to talk about the murder of 2 young girls.
If you listened to last week's episode of The Murder Sheet, you may be experiencing some deja vu. We already covered the Delphi murders this month, after all. Well, the same day we came out with our episode on the sketches, there was quite a lot of chatter about the case online. Some of it was very heated.
See, a very popular podcast came out with some episodes of their own that sparked quite a bit of controversy in the true crime world. True Crime Garage, a chat-style podcast helmed by hosts Nick and the Captain, has been covering Delphi since 2017. On August 2nd and 3rd, they released a 3-part run on the case titled Delphi Murders, Under the Bridge. The episodes each featured a conversation with a Reddit researcher who goes by the pseudonym Skip Jansen.
We'll boil down Skip's theory without too much editorializing. Skip feels that an eyewitness in the Delphi case, a young man who was near the Monon High Bridge with a young woman on the day of the murders, is the real killer, and that other witnesses are lying for this young man, and that the witness also managed to derail the investigation into the killings by giving false statements that led to the development and release of the first sketch in the case. For more information on the controversy around the sketches, listen to our previous episode from last week.
Anyway, these episodes caused some commotion online. Fans of Under the Bridge said they appreciated hearing about a new theory on the case. Critics were upset because they felt True Crime Garage was pointing a finger at an easily identifiable private citizen and other witnesses based on often iffy evidence, questionable logic, and confusing sources from an anonymous researcher.
In terms of our reaction, Kevin and I fell squarely into the critics category. Still, we debated doing an episode on this. Covering Delphi is only an occasional thing for us. We had a restaurant case ready to go. But we realized that there were some super interesting questions about ethics in true crime at play here. So we emailed the captain with our concerns about the show. And, to our surprise, he got back to us.
We asked him some pretty tough questions, and we were very impressed that he actually hopped on the phone to talk with us about all of this. We hope you'll find this interesting too, if only as an introduction to questions about ethics in the world of true crime. Here's our talk with the captain about True Crime Garage's latest run of Delphi episodes.
My name is Anya Kane.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee.
And this is The Murder Sheet, a weekly true crime podcast.
Anya and I connected over the Burger Chef murders, a 1978 unsolved case involving the killings of 4 young restaurant employees.
Now we're looking to track restaurant homicides. To help us understand the patterns of these crimes, we created a spreadsheet of nearly 1,000 eatery-related killings, the Murder Sheet. We'll be drawing on that data throughout Season 1 to give you a deep dive into undercovered crimes.
We don't just rely on skimming the headlines. We dive into these cases to bring you in-depth coverage.
We're The Murder Sheet, and this is the Delphi Murders, a conversation with the captain from True Crime Garage. So yeah, I guess we were just curious with True Crime Garage sort of like vetting procedures with, Reddit guests. I know Kevin and I have had anonymous guests on the show, so we just wanted to get a sense of what you guys do to like kind of say, this guy's legit, we're going to go with this.
Would you want me to explain how I got in contact with Skip?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and obviously we know he's anonymous, so you don't we're not looking for you to expose him or anything, but just, general vetting process?
Yeah. So what initially happened, if anybody's followed like our coverage, at some point we put out an episode where I never stated an individual's name, or I don't actually believe I even put out their initials or anything, because in the Delphi case, for whatever reason, we don't call bridge guy. We call him BG. We don't call flannel shirt guy. We call him FSG. So that's kind of been a theme. So I don't even believe I put out initials like, ST or PE or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So when we covered that, and I can't remember, we've done so many Delphi episodes at this point, but a lot of people alluded to like, oh, he must have a suspect that he really likes. And I had a suspect that I thought was suspicious. I basically took some information that I had to local law enforcement and had them go over the information that I uncovered myself, and they agreed with me on what they saw. And so we submitted that to Indiana State Police via local law enforcement here, because I wanted to make sure that Indiana State Police got that information. So I didn't know that the guy that I talked about, there was a couple things that I said that tipped people off to who I was talking about, or they thought I was talking about. And I got this weird Instagram message saying, "You're wrong." And the guy left his number, so I called him, and then he basically told me this whole theory about Eyewitness that has been on a bunch of forums, changing his story. And I kept vetting the guy that I thought it was, to the point where I believe I figured out the guy, again, the guy that I thought was suspect of the murders. I believe I vetted him as much as I could, and believe that his alibi is checked out. So that was months and months ago. And so then after that happened, I ended up talking to Skip on the phone, and he basically went over. Skip never initially, he wasn't the one that introduced himself. It was a different individual. And he told me this, told me the theory. I said it makes sense. And so then I ended up talking to Skip on the phone. He goes over the theory more in detail. Then I say, well, that's cool, man. I have to take a step back from the Delphi case, personal health and mental health reasons, because it was just, every night at 5 p.m., I'd say, don't go on the internet.
Right.
Don't go searching for information. And a lot of these people on the internet, they get information from the internet, and then they don't do anything with it. They go, well, I saw the screenshot, and well, that must mean this, or that must mean that. I started calling these places. The guy that I thought it was, one of the things in question was this husband and wife were on vacation during that a couple days before the murders. Well, I called those venues of places that they claimed that they were at, and I actually talked to real people and got them to tell me if they could tell me if they were there or not. And so I just always felt like people putting stuff out on the internet was very irresponsible, because they weren't doing their due diligence to figure out if this had any weight to it. Basically, every couple weeks or so, I'd get talking to other people investigating the cases, talking to private investigators investigating Delphi on their own. And I kept on coming back to this theory that Skip presented me with. And so then I started talking to Skip on the phone, hours at a time. But it started becoming, he would make a statement. I'd say, cool, prove it. And then he'd prove it. show me the proof. Make another statement, prove it. And everything that I've ever asked for him to show me proof of, he's been able to do so. Then we set on this idea for months because Skip actually spent time going to Delphi, talking with sources that he has close to the case and people in the area, and making sure that he wasn't just going to be put in fire underneath this eyewitness that possibly could be a suspect. And so, I mean, it was months and months of going back and forth with him, files being shared, and tons of files that we never shared, and information on the 3 episodes that we were never able to share. And like I said, I sat on this information for months. My father is a retired detective, so then I went over all the information with my father. My father was concerned that it would somehow mess up the investigation and Delphi possibly, and asked for me to contact Delphi law enforcement, which I got, I think, 6 or 7 different contact numbers for Tobe Lisenby. And then I called and left. Some of the numbers were disconnected, but a number that I believe actually was a office line to him. I left several messages with my contact information and stated if this would mess up the investigation, or if this eyewitness is just an eyewitness, and shouldn't be. Maybe law enforcement knows that he lied to them. There's many times in cases eyewitnesses lied to law enforcement, but that doesn't mean that they're a murderer. It just means that they were covering up because they were maybe cheating on their spouse, or maybe they were using drugs or something at the time. So I called and left multiple messages and never heard anything back. And then it becomes, do you put this information out or not? And we decided to obviously put out the information.
I'm curious, did you, I guess I'll refer to him as the witness, the person who's sort of at the center of this theory. Maybe he's not a witness, maybe he's a perp, is sort of the central theory here. But for that guy, did you guys try to reach out to him or Cheyenne, who's another kind of person who's sort of central to Skip's theory?
So the eyewitness, or we'll just call him the eyewitness, the eyewitness was reach out to several people that I know, and he never even on Facebook it will let you know if the person checked the message, and he wasn't checking those messages. So I kind of felt like the people that I knew that reached out to him that he wasn't checking the messages for, that he was just not responsive to anybody. I did send a message to his fiance because I believe that she's in danger. And I told her that, gave her my information and said if she needed it to go over any information that I have, that I would happily do that with her. And there was just no response after that.
Okay. And I apologize if you guys did this and we just didn't hear it. But in terms of
but let's go back to Cheyenne for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So Cheyenne was a witness. You know, the eyewitness that we brought up, which I actually wanted to use the individual's name because he has brought up his name on Facebook forums, Reddit forums, other forums. He has brought that upon himself. Cheyenne has done the same thing. Cheyenne then contacted our website to say, if she hears her name used again, that she'll go to law enforcement. It said we would welcome any discussion in a court of law because we could go over discovery. We have every piece of evidence, everything that we stated on the show, we can back up. Obviously we were asking Skip certain questions. Well, a lot of the information I've already seen firsthand. So, and then I had to remind her, because I said if she would like to go over any information I have, or if she would want to clear up anything, she said she was not interested. And then she basically said she didn't appreciate having her name be on public forums. And then I reminded her that she was the one for the last few years putting her name and person on public forums, such as Facebook groups, Reddit, and other public forums.
Yeah, you mentioned that you wanted to mention him by name. I'm curious what made you decide not to use his name on the episodes.
We have a partnership with the podcast, between me and Nick. And Nick didn't feel comfortable doing that, which I respected. And again, like I said, my father advising us that if he wouldn't have done that himself, but just being honest that I would have no problem using his name because, like I said, he was the one that went to public forums and gave information. So he came out early in the investigation and said he was the eyewitness. He also came out and said he was the one that was responsible for the first sketch that was released. And then, like I said, answered questions and told about his possible events of that day.
I'm curious, you mentioned sort of your dad's advice on law enforcement. Have you guys, and if you can't say, no worries, but I figured I'd ask, have you guys heard from law enforcement since the episodes have come out?
No, but I believe that they're monitoring our blog. I know they're monitoring Facebook groups and Reddit.
On the episodes, you said that you didn't name him because of legal and safety reasons. And I'm just curious, could you elaborate on what those legal and safety reasons were?
Well, no, that was, again, I don't think it's legal or safety reasons in the sense of, again, you put your name out there to these public forums. We're backing up everything that was discussed on those episodes is stuff that he already put out on those public forums. So that's why I had no problem with using his name. Also, we're stating the theory is this simple. Eyewitness lied and changed his story multiple times. Didn't come forward for 7 to 8 days. Is responsible for the first sketch. Law enforcement then comes out 2 years later and says that sketch becomes secondary, implying that whatever information they got from that eyewitness was not good enough or they did not believe, so they switched directions. They came out with a second sketch. That second sketch comes from eyewitnesses. If you compare this eyewitness, it matches it. And so I wouldn't have a problem with putting his name out. Safety reasons. If our simple theory is eyewitness lied or eyewitness changed their story. Now, if you go with eyewitness changed their story, that's implying that they lied, right? So that person then should become a suspect. And we know because we've had law enforcement state that we believe we talked to you. And one of the things when they said, well, why hasn't there been arrests? And they said, because they weren't identified as a suspect early on. So name me what they could be identified as in a criminal case. If they talked to the person early on and he wasn't a suspect, then what did they identify him as?
So I think Kevin and I have talked about the theory a lot, and I want to, I want to just kind of put something out there and see what you think about it, because I think there's interesting elements of it, right? Where I think the bit about, well, did they see the couple or did they hear arguing? Could the arguing have been not a couple, but BG and the girls, right?
That's what I believe.
Right.
I believe Plano Shirt Guy. His initial statements was he heard a couple arguing by the bridge. And my theory is that was Bridge Guy with Abby and Libby.
And yeah, and so like things like that I think are interesting from people like us who follow the case, where we're saying, okay, we're thinking about what we think is a known fact in a different way. But areas where maybe I'm less comfortable with the theory sort of falls into maybe the degree of certainty with which maybe you and Skip kind of state some certain things. Like I'm thinking first sketch, that's a composite sketch. So like, the eyewitness, right? He's part of that group that's giving information on that sketch, but he's not the sole force behind it because it's a composite of multiple factors.
Right, but again, we're using this eyewitness's language, his own language online. His language online was, I'm responsible for the first sketch released.
Right, but like he's not in law enforcement. Maybe he's overstating his contribution because he's maybe watched too many cop shows and is saying, I got it, but I feel like if the theory hinges upon him derailing the investigation with this sketch, that the theory isn't really borne out by what police have said about the sketch.
Well, I believe this individual matches both sketches anyways.
I don't even know how you could match both sketches, given that one looks like an old dude to me and one looks like some guy, like very fresh faced almost. I could send you the side by sides if you want. Yeah, I mean, to me they're both. We just last week literally our episode was just ripping ISP a new one for the two sketches. So maybe we're just we have our own right.
Well, I would say so too. I've seen multiple side by sides, and the initial, I had a source that initially told me about a suspect, like I said, that I looked into for months, and my big issue with him was constantly I didn't. Side by sides didn't make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. These ones, I mean, to me, it passes the eye test. But again, that's not the crutch of the theory. The simple theory is this eyewitness changed their story. Therefore, they shouldn't be an eyewitness anymore. They should become a person of interest or a suspect. Right,
because obviously someone placing themselves at the scene and saying things that turn out to not be true is suspicious.
Yeah, well, I got an email again over the weekend claiming that we're, the names that they called us were ridiculous, but also, we have easy ways to contact us through email, and this individual could figure that out, so they send the email to our store. Okay, so I'm glad that our store guy forwarded that to me. This person claims that she's connected to the family of this eyewitness, and that we're a bunch of idiots and just lying to try to get clickbait, which I'd like to go into a little bit on the clickbait in a second. But stating that she knows we're lying because she was told by the eyewitness that he doesn't remember exactly what time he got there or whatever, but he was there with his fiance, and that he left by 2 p.m. And so then I sent her all the screenshots of him saying that he got there at 3 something, and he was sitting up on the bridge at 3:19. So I don't know what he's telling people around him, but obviously the lies continue.
My thing with and I want to make sure we understand, because I don't want to be, saying, oh, well, I want to make sure we understand from you. Basically, changing his story, from what I can tell from the episodes, does that basically amount to saying he was there with a girl who was his girlfriend, and then switching to actually she wasn't my girlfriend, and then going going back and saying, maybe I don't know if I could identify this man later. Are those kind of the two central facets of that part?
Yeah, at one point, again, he says he's responsible for the first sketch. And then he later says, well, maybe I didn't even see Bridge Guy. Maybe I saw Flannel Shirt Guy. But in his initial statements about seeing Bridge Guy, he talks a lot about the scarf that Bridge Guy was wearing. And we know Flannel Shirt Guy was not wearing a scarf. So it's just things like that where, again, and it could be as simple if you want to break up the whole theory that we have and blow it up and make it nonsense. It simply could be that this guy is changing his story to cover for some other reason. And again, that would not make him a suspect. That would just make him somebody that's trying to, preserve whatever action he doesn't want other people knowing about. But yeah, initially he said he was with his fiance, and then later said no, he wasn't with his fiance. He was with this other girl, but he was cheating on his fiance, so he didn't want her to, find that out.
And yeah, I mean, that's obviously a crappy thing to do, but to me, that is something that I could see a dude lying about.
Oh yeah, and I totally could see that. And so again, with the other thing that's interesting about Skip's theory is once you listen to this theory and you really start breaking down everything that Skip's saying, and then you go back and listen to 2019's press conference in April, not the one in February, but the one in April, they're not talking, in my eyes, to a hypothetical. They're not doing a John Douglas came in and made a profile, and now we're going to speak to a hypothetical killer that we think we know based on a profile. I believe they're talking to an individual. Again, like they said, we likely interviewed you. I believe they're talking to a person that they know. Again, he also brings up points in the investigation that a lot of people have never discussed, the GBI coming in for peer review and items like that. I also believe that 2019's February's press conference was a ruse by law enforcement because they basically came out and said nothing new. And I think they were monitoring those press conferences and then expected to have, they made an announcement of the April press conference given this person that they're going to talk to 4 days to be in the room, and he didn't show up.
I guess the issue maybe I had with some of the certainty with which you guys talked about this is just we don't know what cops were doing. I mean, unless any of us have sources within the investigation, which I can say I don't. But just tell me what part that you think we're talking to certain about. Just that this guy's definitely the murderer of Libby and Abby.
No. So that would be a misconception. My theory is simply this guy has lied about his whereabouts, possibly even lied about what vehicle he had that day and where he was parked, and so his story hasn't lined up 100%. Therefore, he should be suspect. He should be looked into further. But when he placed himself as arguing couple, I believe arguing couple is BG arguing with victims. So if that statement is true, which again, we don't know, but if that statement is true, that would place him in contact with Abby and Libby. Obviously, most likely be the murderer.
Again, Cheyenne and presumably the girl who was with him, you want to say her fiance, girlfriend, side piece, whatever, were talked to by police. I mean, I would guess. I don't have a source on that, but that would be.
No, I'm certain they were, but you have to understand too that Cheyenne's story changed on online forums as well. And again, don't know why. And I look, the other thing about it is, yes, she claims that she never saw Bridge Guy. She claims that she saw this eyewitness. But just because she saw this eyewitness, we don't know where she saw him, when she saw him. And so, again, all that does is put this eyewitness in the park, which is the scene of the crime, roughly around the time the girls were killed. And so it still goes with our theories, if that makes any sense.
So if this theory is true, and the witness who's barely out of his teens succeeds in completely derailing the investigation.
Well, he would have been in early 20s, yes.
So doesn't that mean that the ISP and the FBI and the local authorities would have to be really stupid to fall for this?
No, that's another misconception. One of the things that, I'd love to do like a 3-hour correction of everybody. It's hard to, that's the other thing too, is one of the things I wanted to do was take all this information that we gathered and lay it out piece by piece instead of doing an interview. I thought that would make more sense. But, we went with the interview way because normally when I was talking with Skip, he had a good way of, he could recall like within seconds what information like I said, there's so many times where I go, well, that's nice that you're telling me that, Skip, but I have no proof of that. And you go, hold on a second. You send me a file, when the guy does that over and over, it starts getting a little spooky. You know what I mean? So when people go, oh, well, you're going to tell me that this kid is so smart that he duped law enforcement? Well, go back to the retired FBI agent that is friends with Carter. Carter was smart enough to say, this case is too big for us, right? So we got to call in FBI. Now, do you remember the statement that they made on how many agents were in Delphi working the case?
No, refresh your memory.
Over 100.
Right.
So now we have Indiana State Police. We don't know how many of them. Over 100 FBI agents. And we have the Sheriff's Department. Now, let's just say that us three go out and interview all eyewitnesses. Mm-hmm. If there was any story that didn't line up, we would know that because we interviewed every eyewitness. But what I believe happened is that they interviewed all the eyewitnesses and they started going, okay, well, this eyewitness saw BG. So let's not pay attention to his story beforehand or after. Let's focus on identifying this individual. And I don't think it was until the GBI came in and did a peer review that they went back through the eyewitness statements and they started seeing that some things weren't lining up. Make sense?
I hear you. I guess, the thing that maybe sticks up for me is one thing that seemed to be sort of part of Skip's theory, and I don't want to butcher it, so correct me if I misstate this, but that our eyewitness here, who might be the perp, is motivated by some sort of combination of revenge, drugs, and maybe some sort of sexual gratification, unfortunately. And to me, to have all those investigators potentially miss somebody with a big red flag of like, I'm out for revenge against one of the girls' families, or I have a weird connection to one of these girls that can't be explained. That seems like a huge oversight.
Well, no, again, I think that's the other thing too, is like, again, I believe a lot of these eyewitnesses, whether they're interviewed by this FBI group or this sheriff group, I think if they split those duties up because they had so much manpower that they could do that so they could get the information faster. But that, again, if we all three did the interviews ourselves, we would be able to see those discrepancies pretty easily. But I don't think anything that we were putting out on the podcast is any information that law enforcement doesn't already know. And we back that with the idea that if you take what they said, again, we believe this eyewitness was parked at the CPS building.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing in the 2019 press conference is we want to talk to the driver of the vehicle that was parked at the CPS building from 12 to 5.
Right.
So, and also I think people don't understand too, initially, right away, if you look up any of these suspects' addresses, or you do a background check on any of these eyewitnesses or any of these suspects that are named, you're talking about 30 to 40 sexual offenders that live within a mile of any of these. So I think initially that's what, because of maybe signatures of the scene of the crime, or thinking that this was sexual in nature, and there's also what drives me nuts about this case is there's some things that we know, but people refuse to say that we know them. Like, we know that the girls were missing articles of clothes.
Right.
And people go, well, how do we know that? But because law enforcement told you that they found articles of clothes, of the girls' clothes in the water. So, of course, they have to be missing if they found those articles of clothes in the water. So, is there some sexual component to this case? Probably. But again, FBI and everybody else is going to start looking for, somebody that, again, like the suspect that media has deemed a suspect, Chadwell, because they go, well, look, this guy is capable of this type of crime. But early 20s is not too young to be your first crime like this.
No, and we're not saying that. It seems like part of Skip's theory, it's not just that this guy is the man, he's, BG, but that he also managed to really, pardon my French, but F up law enforcement for like 2 years. And that seems to be a level of sophistication that is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, again, because intelligence is very confusing sometimes. If somebody's smart enough, they can confuse you. But you know what else is also really confusing? Is when people do dumb stuff.
Right.
So I think, I think sometimes people give these killers, everybody wants them to be a Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Well, Hannibal Lecter was based on, Bundy and Dahmer and Gein, and Gein was, walking around with learning disabilities and probably couldn't even spell his own name, so, this Hannibal Lecter type person just normally doesn't exist. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that this individual is that. I believe, look, I said this, if there was a murder in a park, I happen to be at the park, and then I come forward after a few days and say, hey, I saw the guy. Well, my father is a retired detective in the area. Who do you think they're going to go with? And the eye test, when you look at BG, when they came out with the second sketch, my first thought was like, oh my God, that guy doesn't look anything like Bridge Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are they even like, and then that makes you start wondering, how did they get that picture? How do they get that image?
Yeah, it's pretty baffling. And then it's like, are we looking for a guy who looks like both? Are we looking for two guys? Are we looking at one guy and they cleared the first guy? What are we looking for?
Yeah, it's very confusing. And initially, if you would have said Bridge Guy, I would have said, okay, late 30s to 60s. The law enforcement is telling you 17 to 40 could appear younger. So, well, heck, if he can appear younger than 40, well, no wonder that the second sketch that was released makes more sense. The rumor is that was the first sketch that was the second sketch that was released was the first sketch that was drawn.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And if that is correct, there's something about this eyewitness. If he is correct that he is a piece of the puzzle of why they released the first sketch and not the first sketch that was actually drawn, I think that comes from his background, the fact that kid would have been a part of a program in high school where he worked with the county. Prominent family, a good family. Again, goes to that idea of people will be surprised, and what will people around you think. And I know that goes with, a lot of murders, but no. And I think also people I also think people that think that Skip is 100% sold that if this eyewitness is lying, then therefore he's the murderer. And I think his theory is a little bit deeper than that. But just like I've told him, the moment you get the first guy that I thought it was, I maybe got 1,000 guesses of you're heading in the right direction, to the point of some of the stuff that I found was scary. Like fearing for my life, like making sure my cameras in my house were working, making sure my guns were loaded. And then when I got the no, or the confirmation of what I believe would be his alibi, I had to walk away from it. And I told Skip the same thing. If this eyewitness then comes forward to police and is cooperative, and law enforcement makes a statement that this eyewitness is an eyewitness, he's a credible eyewitness, and he's nothing more than an eyewitness, he'll have to walk away from it, But I think it got to the point with him that he couldn't sit by anymore and go, this guy lied, and we know he lied. And we've heard nothing from law enforcement for the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's definitely been radio silence.
There was something I wanted to ask you about that confused me a little bit. On the episodes, you talked about Libby's phone getting wiped, or in a factory reset process. And I think Skip suggested this was done because the witness encouraged her to do this because he wanted to wipe away the evidence of his contacts with her. And I guess I was wondering, if that was the case, why wouldn't the witness have just wiped the phone himself?
No, I think that's just a theory. I think, you always have these, like, I think weird coincidences, that happen in cases. And I think the fact that we know her phone was reset. My issue with the reset is that we did have an individual that came forward. I can't remember the guy's name, but kid came forward and said, look, I believe she was talking to older gentlemen online. I don't know why a kid would come forward and say that if it wasn't true. Seems like that kid came forward to try to help.
Was that on, I'm so sorry, was that on like Reddit? Or what forum did that person come on?
Well, from some of the sources I have, that's a credible that he came forward to law enforcement. I haven't. That's the other thing too. Is I don't spend any time on Reddit. I've never been a part of any Facebook Delphi group because, again, like I said, all these theories that I've ever heard. I mean, when people are posting, hey, we're on vacation and we're at this event hall, and people tell me they're lying. They're not at that event hall. And I'm like, well, how would they doctor the pictures? How would they do this? Has anybody called? Nobody's called. I've talked to hundreds of people that they think they've solved Delphi or JonBenet Ramsey or the Black Dahlia murders or whatever, and they haven't even took the time just to call the place. And what, like I said, one of the suspects that people were talking about online that I kept on hearing chatter about, I called one of the places, and the place said, oh yeah, they bought tickets and they used those tickets, and they said, do you need us to pull surveillance footage? And I said, no, that's enough for me. How do they get their tickets? Well, they have to submit ID to get their tickets. Okay, well, that's enough for me to go. And they posted that on Facebook that they were there. That's enough for me to say that person was there.
Right.
But so yes, I think it's very irresponsible that people go on these forums and post information and then never do any research at all. And I just want to do that for our show. I mean, we've done over 500 and some episodes. You know, if Nick is not the best, you know, true crime podcaster out there, like as far as amount of information you're going to get on a case, tell me one better. Like, because half these cases, when people go, I've been investigating this case for 2 years, I didn't hear any of this. I'm like, well, you never spoke with the family.
Right.
You know, and people think that we put out this show lightly, like it's clickbait.
Yeah,
well,
tell me more about the clickbait charge, because I know we talked about that earlier, and we wanted to give you sort of an opportunity to, like, how does that feel when people throw out that term, and sort of what your thinking is.
We're True Crime Garage. We put out a show normally every other week on a different case. You know, we get criticized a lot of times because we don't do a lot of solved cases. Well, some of the reasons why we don't do that is we've met so many family members that are begging people to look at our case, do something. You know, we just covered a case lately where there was a new autopsy released that overturns the decision of it being a suicide and possibly, you know, they're saying it was foul play. I don't think our podcast had anything to do with that, but the family was begging for people to cover their case. Would rather cover cases like that and shed light on cases. Would rather cover cases that aren't in the spotlight all the time. Hey, but you know what? One of the reasons why people talk about Delphi is because we had the guts to cover them, you know, before anybody else did. Nobody was talking about them, and the NFL was putting up all this money to post billboards all over the country. And we said, look, this is, you know, a few hours away from us in our own backyard. We need to cover it. We didn't even know much information about it. So we just have to go on there, do the best we can, maybe give some speculation. And now we've covered it so many times. I mean, when Chadwell came out, we felt like we had to cover it. We got thousands of emails of saying, can you cover this? Because they don't want to take the time to do the research themselves. Okay, well, that's what we're here for. So that's what we did. But for people to go on Facebook or Twitter and say, we did this for clickbait, I've met Kelsey. I've met Becky. I've looked at them in their eyes. They personally thanked us when we initially met them. And we were introduced as this was the first podcast to ever talk about the Delphi murders. They thanked us, you know, and then people go on and say, oh, this is clickbait. Clickbait. What do you do with clickbait? Clickbait gets people to listen to your show. And if it's clickbait, then what should we name the show? Delphi Murders, New Suspect. Did we call the episodes that? No, we said Under the Bridge, because Under the Bridge becomes way more important of a conversation. If there was this arguing couple under the bridge, and we know that to be fact, that flannel shirt guy said that he heard that, then that person arguing, I believe, is arguing with Abby and Libby, and then Under the Bridge becomes a part of the crime scene. It becomes more important in this case. But we're not going to get more views. We're going to get less downloads in the next 7 days on these episodes than if we would have just put out a new case. Because some of our audience, they're not interested in the Delphi Murders case.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's just covered so much. I mean, every day there's somebody on YouTube putting out new information, and it's just that's just kind of the way it works. I mean, it's, you know, like when we put out John Benet Ramsey episodes, some people are just not interested in that case, or they've watched too much about it, you know. And so this case in particular, it's close to our chest. And then there was this, you know, people were making these claims that we're arguing with Kelsey on Twitter. Mm-hmm. No, we had a friend that I shared side-by-sides that posted that. Right when she posted the side-by-sides, I retweeted it because I wanted to be held responsible for the reason those side-by-sides were out. Not friends that I gave to and they felt compelled to share those side-by-sides. And then Kelsey asked for those to be taken down. And she asked, like, within minutes of the side-by-sides being uploaded, she asked that we take them down. And we said yes. And then Kelsey's boyfriend came after us, was calling us names. And I told him over and over, everything that we're stating on our show, I can show you actual proof. I will send you all the files if you wish. And then what people didn't see is Kelsey apologizing for her boyfriend coming after us. And we had a private conversation, and that's nobody's business. But again, I could go just take that screenshot of our conversation and put it out on Twitter to let everybody know we weren't arguing, you know, and that Kelsey apologized. But it's not my place to like give it shit what some guy on Twitter thinks. You know what I mean? And I told Kelsey, if there's any information that we discuss that she would want to see the proof of, I'd be happy to send it to her. And I'd be happy to send her a bunch of the other stuff that we have that we've never shared.
Why was her boyfriend upset with the episodes?
No, he was upset with the fact that somebody posted a side-by-side.
Oh.
Because law enforcement and the family have asked for that not to happen. But look, that happens. Why do you put out the sketch in the first place? You know, like, and it becomes a tough thing because, you know, I feel for that family. You know, look, anybody that's looked into this case extensively, if you haven't cried randomly when you're investigating this case, you don't have a heart. Especially when you hear about some of these rumors. Oh, this was found at the scene, or did you hear that this might have been a signature? I mean, it's disgusting. And there's an animal out there. There's an actual animal, an evil demon animal that murdered these two girls. And whether it's revenge or somebody connected to the family or whatever, you're not responsible for the other person in your family's actions. You're still innocent. So yeah, but there's a part of me that goes, people are, like I said, there's millions of families that wish that a podcast would cover their family's case and get the word out about it, you know?
Yeah. Shine a spotlight on it.
One thing I'm curious about is we've talked about how on an earlier episode, you talked about someone you considered a suspect. And although you didn't name him, some people did figure out who you were talking about. And through your investigation, you subsequently cleared him to your satisfaction. I was just wondering, in your mind, do you owe him any sort of apology for accusing him of being this monster?
Who do I owe an apology to?
I'm asking if you believe you owe an apology. You know, on an episode a few months ago, you indicated that you suspected someone.
A guy and his wife.
Who? Tell me their name.
You did not name them. That is true.
Yeah, but you.
Right.
You
That's my argument. That's my smart ass. That's my smart ass.
No, I get it.
Yeah. No, and you know what? I will not back off the fact that what I found on that guy is scary. And I'm not saying he's a murderer or whatever, but the stuff that I found out, or forums that I saw him writing on, and the language in which he writes, scary. And I had neighbors of his tell me stories and about conflicts and events that took place at his house that I think are scary. So I don't owe nobody an apology. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to figure out who killed these two girls. And in every case, there's going to be casualties. That's just the way it works. I mean, we covered the Tyler Davis case, missing guy in Columbus. And his best friend was with him. And Tyler got drunk, and Tyler would take off. He gets all mad when he gets drunk, and he has to go for a walk. Mm-hmm. And he wants people to follow him. This is what his best friend tells me. He goes, I'm tired of following him. I've been following him for years. We cover the case. We never say the kid's name. But everybody knew that his best friend was with him. So then all these online forums blow up. and start saying, well, maybe this guy did something to his best friend. And, like all these rumors start happening, and the kid went on Facebook. I'm looking for answers with my best friend. Here's my number. He puts all this stuff out thinking that people are going to help. And now these people want to turn the best friend into a murder suspect. You know what I mean? We've never found Tyler Davis. He's not out there. And the friend called me and he said, well, what can I do? Do I go online and tell people what I know, or what do I do? And I just said, look, for the rest of your life, you're going to be known as the friend that didn't go after his friend that went missing. You know what I mean? Like, that's just part of your story now. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person, but there's going to be thousands of people online that think you are, or assume you are, or says, and they assume it with Tyler's wife, even though police have said she's definitely not a suspect. You know what I mean? And these
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And I was just going to say, in these cases, some of that happens, and it's just like with this eyewitness. You went online. You wanted to take credit for delivering this sketch. You wanted to be a big shot. Well, I guarantee you law enforcement told them, you don't need to tell people about this. And you go online and start telling all these people information. You start changing your story. So, yeah, I think you should become a suspect.
I mean, I guess
to me, that's on him, not on me.
But I mean, if you're helping to potentially sick an internet mob on someone for dumb online posts, I mean, doesn't that seem a little harsh?
Wait, dumb online?
If you're helping to sick an online mob, towards a guy, and it turns out
I'm not responsible for that.
You have a huge platform, though.
Yeah, but I can control my platform. I can control my Instagram. I can control my Twitter. I can't control a Facebook group that I didn't even know existed.
But you can control what you say on your podcast.
Yeah, but so where am I wrong that this guy was an eyewitness and lied? And if by definition, what should he become?
Here's the thing, Captain. I guess my feeling is when you say he's an eyewitness who lied, that sounds pretty bad. But when we're saying he said it was one girl rather than the other, and he said, maybe I don't remember what he looks like anymore, that kind of knocks it down a peg for me, because that's not super material to what we know happened that day, I guess. And when you're taking that and saying he's likely a child murderer, that seems a little bit like you're jumping to a conclusion.
No, again, that's not my theory. My theory is that this eyewitness changed his story multiple times, not just 2 times, and not just saying, I was with my fiance. No, I wasn't with my fiance. I was with this other girl. But changing times of when he got there, how long he was there. I mean, it's not just one thing that he has changed his story on. And so what I'm saying is, if you have eyewitnesses that have changed their story multiple times, by definition, I believe they should become a person of interest. And then the only caveat to that is, I personally believe that arguing couple is Bridge Guy interacting with Abby and Libby. And if that's true, and this guy places himself as being part of arguing couple, then it seems that this eyewitness had contact with Abby and Libby.
If you were wrong, do you just sort of see it as like casualty of the business, as sort of you mentioned?
Well, no, I think that's too flippant, because like I said, if anybody's followed like the Brian Schaefer case, his friend Clint and Meredith that were with him that night, it sucks what happened to him. Brian's dad hired a private investigator to go after Clint. Clint doesn't even go by his real name anymore. The private investigator, the police, they created this narrative And even when we covered the case, I said, man, I'd like to know more information about this Clint guy, right? And then, I've talked to his lawyer. And he's like, what is there to know? Anytime they've asked us a question, we've answered the question. He only lawyered up because he was getting accused of this stuff. I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, it's just a casualty. You're just, oh, yes. Well, I just think it's too flippant. What happened to them is awful. And if this kid is just an eyewitness, and he's lying to cover up the fact that he was cheating on his girlfriend, which is not something you should be arrested for. And in no way, shape, or form, if you cheated on your girlfriend, does that make you a murderer of, like I said, an evil demon animal that would have had to murder these two girls? Those don't equal themselves. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is we're sitting on information for the last 2 years and nobody's talking about it. And people are bringing up suspect after suspect. And you can't even tell me that that individual was in Delphi the day the girls went missing. So, and like I said, you reach out to law enforcement because you go, hey, I feel obligated to put this out there,
Mm-hmm. And they never got back to you.
Yeah. Tell me if I'm wrong, I will not put it out. I'm not here to I'm not just some content creator that is just trying to come out with the newest, sensationalized story. I mean, there's YouTube videos every day put out on the Delphi murders of just rumors, and this is not a rumor. This is, like I said, he changed his story and I have proof of it, and so then if you go, well, isn't that bad that, people are going to suspect him of this or that? He has every ability to clear himself. The cops have every ability to come forward and say he's not a suspect, he's an eyewitness. But cops even told us, we talked to this person. We believe, one of the reasons why they're not arrested is they were never identified as a suspect early on, implying that they were identified as something else.
Why do you suppose the police have never identified him as a person of interest?
Well, I think they have by their 2019 press conference. But I don't think people look. I think I think the fact that somebody saw what this kid was put in online and was able to think that they should take a record of it is very smart. But I think law enforcement had this. I think they had this information all along. I don't think anything that we put out that law enforcement doesn't know.
Well, listen, Captain, we took up like an hour of your weekend, and we just want to say we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and kind of go through some of this stuff.
Well, and my final statement would be like to see this stuff, like we're horrible people, We've done 500 and some episodes. Like I said, we cover cases every week. Like, this gets to you. Like, I've wanted to quit for years, like it's, Nick's the true crime expert. I was just a broke musician,
mm-hmm.
and I want so badly for these, cases to be solved. And I don't think people understand, they just think, oh, well, we did this interview and that's it. I mean, I spent months talking with Skip, and like I said, every time he presented, well, he lied about this. He lied about where he was parked. Well, prove it. Okay. Once he proves it, it's like, okay, well, that's another lie. And just like you said, if it's just one or two things, not that big of a deal. But I think once you take that theory and you put it all together, and then you listen to what the way they talked to this individual in 2019, like I said, I felt in my heart that we had to do something. And it just feels like for the last 2 years, like nobody's doing anything. And like we just forgot that these girls were viciously murdered.
Yeah, and there's such a vacuum of information out there at this point that, police are not doing any more press conferences, it seems like, for the time being.
Yeah, and I also thought their statements were really interesting because, well, first of all, with Chadwell, media is the one that says he was a suspect. I don't believe law enforcement ever came out and personally said he was a suspect. And then so when media was asking, because I think Chadwell is going to try to use leverage and basically try to hint at the fact that I know more about Delphi and I can tell you more about Delphi, but you left in this sentence here. And then he just won't have any information on Delphi. That's my personal gut feeling. That's what his lawyer's going to try to concoct some deal and use Delphi as leverage. But I thought it was a very interesting statement that they come out and say, we're having a blackout and we're not going to talk about Chadwell or any other suspects in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it makes sense. And also just when you consider that Chadwell's lawyers were pushing for a change of venue, like if everybody who committed a crime against a child in the area did that, it would be a logistical nightmare for the authorities there. So it's like...
Well, and I believe they said, or other suspects, because they wanted to let their suspect know, we haven't forgot about you. And again, I mean, if you listen to the trailer, if you listen to the music trailer of the episodes, I mean, when they say never give up, and they say, well, no, we won't stop, and that's the responsibility I feel, from the first moment that we decided to talk about this case.
So you expect to continue covering this case?
I mean, I didn't even want to talk about Chadwell. Because law enforcement never came out and said, well, he was a suspect or whatever. And I just thought, but we got, like I said, we got so many emails. I mean, personally, for like my mental health, I wouldn't want to talk about it until they solve it. And I don't know if I'd be able to stop crying when they do, because, I think people just think, oh, they're just these podcaster guys. They don't care. Just doing it for money or, whatever. It's like, you can have the money. I don't care. It's, somebody, they said, when you see something, say something. Well, my platform is just a little bit larger than everybody else. But when I see something, I'm damn going to say it, and maybe that will solve something. And if it doesn't, then, because that's the thing too, is when the people go, oh, well, there's just these suspects online and their lives are ruined. Their lives aren't ruined. They move on. But, like I said, this eyewitness could come forward and they could clear him and do it publicly. But he's not going to come forward. He's not going to talk to law enforcement. So.
Well, listen, we can... Talking to you, we can tell that you care about this case, and we do really appreciate you coming on and clarifying some stuff and chatting with us. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Is there anything we didn't ask you about? That's my final question with everything. Did we not ask you about anything that you wanted to add that you want to put out there?
I mean, like I said, I wish I could have a files that people could download online.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I have way more information than we even talked about on the show that I can't share, and I can't share Skip's contacts because I think their jobs would be in jeopardy.
Yeah, we get that. That's a sourcing agreement. That's sacred. We get that.
And I wish Tobe would have called me to tell me what was right to do and what was wrong to do. I don't know. I mean, and like I said, I think all you can do at the end of the day is go with your heart and know that your heart's in the right place and try your best. And I think that's what we did. And 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 I don't even know where Nick stands on this theory. I mean, other than Eyewitness lied, he should become a person of interest. But no, I appreciate your guys' questions, and it's something that I think everybody should question. Especially when you have a platform or these news media, especially now. I mean, heck, half the stuff that is put out, it's like the next day they're contradicting themselves, and yeah.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being like, hey, yeah, I'll talk to you guys, and we'll talk about the case. We'll talk about the theory.
Yeah, and I think the thing too is it's just like there's so many people passionate about it, and that's the other thing too is like it's like politics. We all want the world to be better. We just see different ways to do it. But then the infight, if we could stop the infighting, we could get further. But sometimes people are just going and I've had so many people just blast me about this and try to say we're this or that. It's like, okay, you can think what you want, but it's like it's but just the nonsense. Oh, it's clickbait. Oh, you think that everything that says Delphi Murders gets like an extra 200,000 listeners? That's not the way it works. That's the way it works if you're a Delphi only podcast or a Delphi only YouTube channel. Yes, anytime there's some juicy information, people are going to go check out your show. That's not how it works when you're covering a different case every week. We have an obligation to our listeners to put out new cases every week, not just to stay on the same case over and over. But after 3 months, I just was like, I can't sit by anymore and not have this information out there. And maybe it'll light a fire under one of these eyewitnesses, or maybe the eyewitness we're talking about to come forward. If he thinks it's so wrong that we're mentioning his, not his name, but a nickname online or on the show, if you think it's so wrong, then come forward and talk with police.
We also reached out to Skip himself, and he answered our questions via Reddit. We'll read out some of our questions and his responses now, and then we'll be back with a few more words about our impressions of the captain. Just as a note, we've lightly edited our questions and his responses to remove identifying information.
Have you ever attempted to reach out to the eyewitness or Cheyenne?
I have not ever attempted to reach out to the eyewitness or Cheyenne.
Do you feel that referring to the eyewitness by his initials cloaks his identity enough? Do you share the captain's worries, as stated on the first episode of the latest 3-part Delphi run, around legal and safety concerns? If so, what negative legal or safety outcomes are you worried about?
I just follow the rules of the platform that I am participating on. If they allow initials, I use initials. No, I'm not worried about legal or safety concerns. If someone sues me, I would get to depose them in discovery. I doubt that's something they want to do.
Do you think it's responsible to run an online campaign accusing an easily identifiable private citizen of murder?
My comments are based on a theory that looks into a citizen that injected himself into the case, a trait the FBI said Bridge Guy might exhibit. He was participating in Facebook groups from early on. He's easily identifiable due to his own actions.
Before we wrap up, we'd like to say a few things about our impression of the captain.
You see, our conversation didn't end when the interview ended. We talked off the record for quite a long time afterwards. He's one of the OG true crime podcasters. His show has a massive following, and he's covered lots of crimes. I think Anya and I both went into the interview expecting a smooth talker, someone sort of emotionally removed from the whole thing.
Instead, the person we talked to was deeply sincere. We feel the captain cares about the victims in all the cases he talks about. He's very direct, surprisingly so. Listening to True Crime Garage, you might sometimes get the impression that Nick is the smart one, while the captain is more there for comic relief and hot takes. But we got the sense that he's a sensitive person who takes an active role in the research and case selection. one who spends a lot of time thinking about some truly awful crimes.
To us, the captain seems like a good guy. He seems haunted by Delphi and other cases he's dug into.
That being said, we very much disagree with the way True Crime Garage handled this topic in general. Personally, I feel like the best thing to do in order to showcase the theory might have been to assemble 5 or so Redditors, give them each space to share their own personal theory. That way, you're not giving so much weight to Skip's theory alone, but you're still giving listeners a chance to judge his ideas for themselves. Also, we think that referring to the eyewitness by his initials isn't careful enough. We were able to figure out who they were talking about in a few minutes.
Skip seems like a passionate researcher, and we also very much appreciated his willingness to answer our questions. But frankly, we're not at all convinced by his theory. We flagged most of our specific concerns with the theory in our talk with the captain. We don't know the details of Skip's sourcing or his methods, so we won't critique those. But some of his assertions, not to mention the dead-set certainty with which they're stated, are a little hard to swallow. Part of the problem, in our opinion, is just that we're in an information vacuum. We have to stretch and squint and strain to fill that vacuum with tangible information. That's because the police haven't given us anything too substantial for a while, and also because so many people out there desperately want this thing to be solved.
But that kind of approach can have real casualties. We reached out to the 2 figures mentioned in the True Crime Garage episodes, namely the Eyewitness and Cheyenne, for our show. We didn't hear back from them, and we weren't surprised. I feel like they've been burned so much. Maybe they made mistakes in their lives, or in how they handled their connection to this case. Maybe they posted about this online too much, or were imprecise or sloppy with how they recounted the details. But, based on what we know, I don't think either of them deserve to get accused of being complicit in the murders. In general, I get worried when a witness gets blasted in a high-profile crime like this. I feel like it's a manifestation of our collective frustration with a case remaining unsolved. I feel like us podcasters, researchers, and armchair detectives need to check that impulse. Because if coming forward and talking about your link to an unsolved case is a surefire way of getting accused of the worst possible crimes, you can imagine that some will be reluctant to come forward at all. We can't let our agitation and anguish over a heinous crime spur us to crucify random people for the sin of happening to be in a certain park on a sunny day in February.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Murder Sheet. As always, thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
To keep up with the latest on The Murder Sheet, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Murder Sheet, and on Facebook at MSheet Podcast, or by searching Murder Sheet. If you enjoy listening to The Murder Sheet, please leave us a 5-star review to help us gain more exposure. And send tips, suggestions, and feedback to murdersheet@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening.